Nightmare Reaper is a game about self-care, because sometimes getting rid of your inner demons requires actually getting rid of your inner demons. I probably could have phrased that better, still better than shoot all your problems away, as accurate as that is. Developed by Blazing Bit Games, Nightmare Reaper is a procedurally generated FPS roguelike looter shooter I recommend despite the normal connotations that those buzzwords would suggest, wherein you play as a hospital patient who dreams of what I just told you about. In fact, I enjoy it so much that it's become something of an off-time game for me, something I'll play because I just want to play something and not get bogged down in some of the nitty-gritty details that some games provide you with. That sounds like it could be an insult, but the only other game I can think of that I do that with is Devil May Cry 5, a fantastic game. It isn't exactly slow-paced either. I mean, there's a chainsaw with a grappling hook as its alt-fire, orbital cannons, actual cannons, bees, there's quite a bit. Which is where we'll start. There are 3 levels of weapons with 3 kinds of ammo and random modifiers attributed to those weapons, the amount of which corresponds to how rare they are. You're able to keep one level 1 weapon between levels at the start of the game, but that changes over time. This does come with its own issues though. For a start, the modifiers are fantastic. They range from the simple, like increasing fire rate, to the absurd, like explosive ammo. There can also be negative modifiers. But not all modifiers are made equal. There's one modifier that stands tall far above the others. Random projectile. It is, as its name would suggest, giving the modified weapon a random projectile from the game's long line of projectiles to fire rather than what it would normally use. For example, the Black Hole Molotov Cocktail. Grenade launcher? Hold on a minute, what is this? I may have found a new favorite weapon. I love this, but it, along with various other modifiers, if I'm being honest, also means that you can over-rely on a single weapon more than on any other. Once I found a weapon I liked, I would often end up sticking with it for the rest of that act, and only really use other weapons if I ran out of ammo on my go-to freedom dispenser. I used a legendary AK for most of Act 1, found the BHMC, then tossed it after a few levels for a shotgun, though that was more so because I kept dying to my own black holes, that I then stuck with until I found a legendary BO9, which I kept all the way into Act 3. And to be fair, this is often an issue when it comes to any game with this kind of RNG weaponry looting, due to the nature of randomness and RNG. A low-level piece of gear can be more useful than a higher-level one simply because of what else it can give you outside of the base stats. It's the only arguably major gripe I really have, apart from the fact there can be some hitching when there's enough clutter on the screen or things happening around you, which is especially noticeable and annoying in the arena. Supplementing the gunplay is primarily the varying forms of character progression found in the game, each tied to their own minigames. The first one you come across is the skill tree, which is presented as a Mario-esque platformer. Each of these upgrades costs money, some of which you can get back in the levels you play inside of it. Another upgrade path is the Jade Tree, a somewhat misleading name for its side-scrolling space shooter minigame, which you don't even unlock until you enter the arena mode, and has some truly interesting upgrades. You can find upgrades to make you immune to acid and lava here, as well as get a pet that has an effect that depends on which pet you have, which is itself entirely unrelated to another upgrade path tied to a Monster Pets Pokemon-esque minigame, that among other things has pills that can modify the way level functions. Each of these upgrade paths has something unique to it that garners a reason for you to use them. I like it. If you don't want to do them, thankfully you can turn the minigames off like I did through the options menu and still get those upgrades and bonuses. They can slow down the game a good deal while still on, because you could be in the middle of a firefight and suddenly, I picked up enough cash for double jump, let's get it now when I know I can get it. Another thing that can really slow down that pacing is somewhat ironically the game's own emphasis on completion. Every level has 4 different categories of completion: kills, treasure, secrets, and gold. That last one is just how much gold you get by the end of the level, but the other 3 have tangible numbers inside of a level. In the upper right corner of the screen is a map, as well as a skull and a treasure symbol. The former is how many enemies are still alive and kicking in the level, and the treasure is how much treasure, shocker, there is on the level. Which importantly includes the treasure that you can find inside of secret rooms. So you'll know you've missed at least one secret area if you've scoured the ground everywhere and there's still a non-zero number up in the corner of the screen. I spent a good deal of time just wandering around after murdering everything within a 3-mile radius because collecting those treasures garners a big bonus at the end of the level, which in turn goes towards upgrading what I can do in those levels, some of which includes increasing that bonus. I'm actually curious how much of my time was spent doing that. Something else to note is that the enemy number in the corner doesn't account for enemies that spawn in until after they spawned in, and the treasure number doesn't account for treasure that enemies drop until that treasure is dropped. Literally speaking, if it isn't physically in or on the level, it isn't counted until it suddenly is. You might also note that on the map, closed doors are marked and locked doors are color-coded where applicable. There are puzzle rooms which can be effectively ignored, especially early on using the grappling hook of the chainsaw. Personally, being able to go through a puzzle using possibly unintended means, though still within the confines of the mechanics of the game, is something I like. Besides, you might not even have a chainsaw, so the ability to cheese these puzzles isn't always certain. And later on with puzzles like it, there are these floating balls that temporarily negate the use of your own personal grappling hook to negate this kind of situation. By the way, you get a grappling hook later, don't worry about it. Thankfully, these kinds of platforming hop over the spikes puzzles aren't the only things that the game throws at you in terms of puzzles, and the level layout changes, especially in terms of visual aesthetics, drastically as time goes on to the point that Tim Curry would be proud. Peppering these levels are also visually and mechanically distinct enemies, some of which are elites, variants of an enemy that have a modifier or modifiers applied to them. They're visually distinct from their normal and air quotes allies, usually in terms of size and aura around them, and a distinct symbol floating above their heads that denotes what kind of elite they are. The size increase can have issues though. Okay, so it looks like just a single shot version of what I've already got. Oh, hi! Hello! Die! Fool! You think you could stop me, weird soldier? Your head is flipping. Alright, you know what? Thanks for that. There's also timed power-ups that you can find at the levels that garner various power-ups. I wish I'd known where that sentence was going. There's Reflection, V, Horsewater, and the titular Nightmare Reaper power-up, to name a few. A cool choice that can change the way a level looks is the ability to change the level of gore from ended enemies. I'll admit it doesn't quite reach Proteus levels of blood spewing while coating blood, but it's still a nice touch. There's also the audio. The music is mostly done by Andrew Hulshult, with Lee Jackson doing some of the minigames tracks. Fantastic. All in all, there isn't that much to say about Nightmare Reaper. It's a game that sets out to do a thing and does that thing well. If you're a fan of FPS games, roguelikes, Borderlands, you should get it. Story out.
Hey, you. You're finally awake.